Hi everyone, thanks for joining me once again for another Saturday round of stories. My name's Peter, you're watching Thailand Bound, and if you haven't been here before, I talk about all things Thailand. Right, I've got three stories. The first and the third one are fairly short, but I've got a quite a long one in the middle, and I think you're going to enjoy the story. Just before I get started, somebody commented last week, they said, "What's that noise in the background?" I don't know if you can hear it. It's actually my air conditioning, because normally when I sit here and work, I'll have a fan on without a shirt, and that's not a pretty sight. So I put the air conditioning on, but hopefully it doesn't disturb the quality of the sound on this video too much. Okay, let's kick off with the first of three stories today.
สวัสดีค่ะ
After a couple of weeks returning home from Vietnam and realizing that my Vietnam adventure was more lust than love with the girl I spent time with, I went back on Tinder with a paid subscription to match with girls. No, I'm not a drinker, so I generally don't go to bars, which meant I never experienced the girl scene in Vietnam, even though I was there for 3 weeks and was dating unknowingly a bar girl. With some experience under my belt, I vetted the girls I matched with. I truly was searching for love, not just for short-term aerobics. So I was asking about their work, their past, if they had children, their wants, their dating histories, and so on. It wasn't easy for me. The girls I matched with in Singapore, the Philippines, Vietnam, China, Japan, Thailand, Malaysia, Laos, Cambodia, and Indonesia, but eventually I narrowed it. I was thoroughly addicted to the beauty and culture of Asia thanks to the overall positive experience with my Vietnam village girl fantasy come to life, so I decided to focus efforts on finding love in Southeast Asia. Again, it turned out she was much younger than me, 24 years younger in fact. I had to set my dating age preference from 26 to 52, so I was open to meeting love at almost any age. But it was her youthful energy and sweet disposition that won me over. Call her Flower. She is of Chinese descent but grew up in Chiang Rai, living a comfortable life, and her English was fair enough to communicate, even though at times, whether culturally or through misunderstandings, we had some difficulty getting to know our personalities and humour. One thing I've noticed is because of communication barriers and cultural differences, us Western men really do need to be careful with sarcasm, punchy humour, but I digress. Eventually, in late 2022, I made my way to Bangkok to meet her and visit Thailand for the first time. We spent the entire 3 weeks I was there together. She showed me the sights and the sounds of Bangkok, Pattaya and Koh Samui. I loved it, even more than Vietnam for various reasons, but each to their own. I fell for her. Her smile alone can melt the sun. She was fun, caring, beautiful, and the best hostess anybody could hope for. I was, and still am, in love. I also thoroughly enjoyed all of these areas of Thailand I visited. The beaches in Koh Samui and the 2 hotels I stayed at were brilliant. The weather was the cherry on the cake, so I could not complain. Pattaya was certainly an unforgettable experience. We stayed at Pullman G, and I recall writing this, and it was a nice hotel on the beach with all the amenities I require to have a 5-star hotel stay. The first night, my girlfriend brought me to Walking Street, which definitely was an eye-opening experience. I am more of a reserved individual, so I was honestly slightly uncomfortable being there, especially with my new girlfriend on my arm. But she was obviously used to it and giggled at me. We stopped to have one drink in an open bar. Thankfully, we were left alone to enjoy each other's company as I soaked in the goings-on. I can understand the reason why men go to these bars. No need to say more here. Another night, we went into a disco bar called Lucifer. The music was thumping and something I'm not used to, so we left quite early to prefer quiet time with each other. I did enjoy my stay in Pattaya, but I do wonder what it would be like staying there as a single man. I don't believe it's something on the cards for me to experience in this life, and I'm okay with this. We also stopped off at an elephant sanctuary where I got my first elephant ride with her on our drive there from Bangkok with a visit to a floating market. We had lunch at a popular dim sum restaurant in a small town where I was the only Western person. Such lovely experiences. Bangkok, what to say? I was amazed with the public transit system in Bangkok, the taste and quality of food that's everywhere, the low cost of everything, the amenities of modern high-rise condos she lives in, how friendly people were, the markets, the beauty of Buddhist temples, how rich the culture is, the beauty of the women and so much more. I have to stress these points again because I don't do it justice in comparison to where I live in Canada. The sheer cleanliness of the MRT and the BTS stations and trains were amazing to me. I even felt safer where I live, so it boggles my mind why Canada would issue warnings to travel to Thailand. Perhaps I haven't seen the other side of the tracks yet, but never once did I feel unsafe or got scammed. I guess partly because I was with a local showing me around, so here's a pro travelling tip for you to consider. The options for travelling around Bangkok are also endless. It seems subway, trains, river taxis, grab taxis, buses, bikes, tuk-tuks, and whatever else I might be missing. I also felt healthier with the food I was eating, and the sheer abundance and choices of food everywhere is really convenient for a big guy like me. The size and scope of the city dwarfs where I live. A corner block is bigger than my city. The only drawbacks are, at least in Bangkok, there should be a water filtration system in place, and the air pollution at times can be annoying. The heat can also be overwhelming in the daytime, but I'm personally okay with it. Since this first time going back to Bangkok, I've been back 4 times and plan on going again sometime in 2024 to ask my girl to marry me. I am now more experienced with the Thai culture, lifestyle and expat living, so I do also finally have a better understanding of the bar girl scene, which isn't for me. My girl and I have had a bit of a bumpy road developing our long distance relationship, but throughout it all, we keep coming back to each other. Over the past 1.5 years, because of the bumpy road, I also travelled back to Vietnam twice, Singapore, Chiang Mai, Indonesia and Japan. I did meet a few other spirited girls while my girlfriend and I were on breaks, but those stories can be saved for another time. It's always the same when somebody comes to Thailand, isn't it? You get this Thailand bug. Once you've been here once, you don't really want to go anywhere else. It's always back to Thailand to carry on the adventure. Right, we're going to go straight into story number 2 now. This is a very long story, and it dates all the way back to the 80s, and I think you're going to thoroughly enjoy it. I actually enjoyed reading it the first time when I edited it. Okay. I married in 1987 to an Australian lady, but my encounter and experience with Lek from my first story continued to haunt me. It festered in my mind and probably contributed to the breakup of my marriage. We were married on a beautiful island. On the way back to Australia, we stopped for a week in Thailand. Even though I was on my honeymoon and my wife was, by all accounts, a very beautiful woman, memories of my relationship with Lek came rushing back the minute I was on Thai soil. We travelled around Thailand. It was a wonderful experience, but the siren calls of Pattaya never stopped calling. Back in Australia, my relationship with Lop and Prani, the 2 friends I introduced in my previous story, continued to be close. They had purchased a Thai restaurant and were always busy, but I visited them every chance I got. I was into the 2nd year of my marriage. I was undertaking a Bachelor of Science course majoring in biological science at university. I had managed to secure a working position in the Department of Genetics. I was a good student and my future seemed to be heading towards an academic profession. I was allowed to travel once to Thailand alone for 2 weeks to settle some business with Lop's brother. Lop's family was quite large. His mother and 4 of his 7 siblings all lived in Satip, which is only around 70 kilometres away from Pattaya. So on the pretext of visiting his family, I could also secretly visit Pattaya. Despite all the horror stories of scams and sponsorships, I found the Thais to be extremely generous. They never let me pay for anything in restaurants. They always insisted on picking up the bill. I visited Lop's family in Satahip and I stayed with them for about a week. They lived near the airport of Utapio. After settling the business in Satip, I was free for a week to do as I pleased. After a 3-year itch, I found a way back to my old playground. Naturally, my first point of call was a Goodwill bar where I met Lek 3 or 4 years previously. She was long gone, but I met many other girls. Unlike the first time when I was a shy boy, I had developed into a confident young man with no moral constraints. The demon that had been eating at me for years was unleashed. I was out of control and took full advantage of all the things that Pattaya had to offer. One of the girls I met was named Wana. She wasn't the best looking girl, but I was attracted to her pleasant manner and good humour. On the last day of my stay in Pattaya, Wana came up behind me, and before I knew what was going on, she gave me a giant hickey. It was very conspicuous and I didn't like it. I knew I would be going back soon. I was returning to Australia in 2 days. I found myself in an embarrassing predicament. I tried concealing it with makeup, but it was just too big and too red to hide. When I arrived in Sydney, I was greeted by my wife and her father. I was carrying a small bag which I had awkwardly raised up to my neck to conceal my love bite. At arrivals, I noticed that my wife was with her father. He tried to take the small bag which I was using to hide the mark, but I refused to let go. It was a cringy moment. After we had arrived home, my wife noticed my neck. She broke down and wept. I felt awful and came up with a very unbelievable excuse that I had been pranked. About a year after this trip, I came home to find my wife appearing very sullen. She said she had something to tell me, but she was worried that it might upset me. "What is it?" I asked. She said she had been invited to travel to Kenya by a friend, but the invitation was only for her. At first, I thought it a bad idea, but then my devilish thoughts crept in my head. The demon that had possessed me had not been satisfied and surfaced once more. "That's fine," I said to my wife, "as long as I can go and see my friends in Thailand." She naively agreed. Again, I headed to Pattaya to see if I could finally rid myself of the demon that had possessed me during my first trip. I met Wana again, but she was with another man. Wana was a bit shy when I caught her with this man. She said to me in Thai that all I had to do was tell her that I was serious about her and she would leave him. I told her that she would be making a mistake if she did this. A few days later, I received a visit from this man and one of his friends. The friend was really fat and came along as an interpreter. They asked me whether I was interested in Wana, and she had already told him that she had a boyfriend in Australia who might be coming back. I assured him he had nothing to worry about and I would not interfere with their relationship. For the next few days, I bumped into them in a couple of times in the bars, and they even shouted me a beer on one occasion. Wana would always put on a sad face every time she saw me, but she was fair and accepted my decision. To be honest, I had never promised her anything, so I don't understand why she had assumed that I would come back for her. I could speak conversational Thai by now, and I could understand a lot of what the bar girls were saying. Although my demon was still strong, something had started to change. I could now see the bar girls a lot more clearly. Behind the veneer of laughter, happy conversations, fun and banter, I began to detect a tragic undercurrent. I started seeing the desperation of these girls and the miserable state of their lives, and I didn't like it. They were poor girls with no education, born into families that had placed so much responsibility on their shoulders, abandoned by cheating Thai husbands, many with children to look after. It depressed me. By contrast, I looked at the foreigners. Not all, but most, lustful, cash-rich, but emotionally empty, seeking a good time with little regard for the welfare of these girls. Many of them deluded themselves that they could save them from poverty by taking them back to their country. But few had any knowledge of Thai culture and sensitivities. Many of them put me off with their childish behaviour. A Pattaya girl once mockingly told me, when a Thai man gets old, they behave like respectable old men. The Farang, on the other hand, are like little boys in old men's bodies. On one occasion, I met a most intriguing girl in the bar. She seemed more educated and spoke very proper English. At the end of the night, she said to me, "I'm going home as I haven't been successful in finding a sponsor tonight." It was the first time I had heard that term being used. I thought she was just using the word sponsor to avoid the word client, not having anything to gain from me as I was already with someone else. Maybe it was the most truthful thing I'd heard a bar girl say. There were some humorous moments too. On another occasion, while at the bar, there was a young European with whom I had started to talk. He wasn't a bad-looking guy, medium height and blonde hair. I could tell he was a newbie. He started to tell me how the bar scene works, and I patiently listened to him playing dumb. He had acted like he had everything figured out. You know, he said, you can have any woman you want here. You just need to pay the bar fine and she's yours for the entire night for 500 baht. Really? I said, expressing astonishment. We're all like Tom Cruise in this place, he added. While he was explaining, he had stretched out one arm, leaning on a pole. There was a group of 3 girls standing with us. One of the girls, being shorter, unfortunately found herself right underneath his armpit. Quietly, she moved away, saying in Thai, "Oh, this guy really pongs of B.O." All the girls laughed, and the man, not knowing what she had said and probably thinking that she had said something nice about him, laughed along with them. Liang, Pranny's brother, was still playing gigs at hotels, and one night while back in Bangkok, a very cute girl came up to me and introduced herself as Oi. She was a fair-skinned girl from Chiang Mai. The minute she saw Liang approach me, she ran to him and said, "Does he have a girlfriend?" Liang naturally said, "Of course not," refraining from adding, "but he has a wife." That night, Oi took me to her home. In due course, I learned a lot about this girl. She had recently broken off from a long-term Thai partner with whom she had lived for many years. The reason for the breakup was that she was from a poor family and he was from the middle class. Encouraged by his parents to find a partner that was more aligned to his social standing, he had left her for a co-worker. Oi was devastated and turned to drinking to the point of extreme inebriation every night. There was no doubt she was an alcoholic. She had left Chiang Mai to come and live in Bangkok, working in an expensive Japanese gentleman's club. Some of the stories she disclosed about her clients were bewildering. She told me it's the girls that choose the men and not the other way around. If a girl doesn't want a man to choose her, she only has to turn her head away from his gaze or give him an unfriendly look. Oi, with her fair skin, was attractive by Japanese standards and was very selective about her clients. My wife, en route to Australia from Africa, joined me for a couple of nights in Bangkok, but at this stage I was so embroiled in the seedy side of Bangkok and Pattaya that I couldn't wait till she was on the plane. It made me feel so bad, and I wondered why I had married her. After her departure, I returned to Pattaya. Soon after returning home, my marriage collapsed. Surprisingly, it wasn't due to my infidelities that led to this, but hers. She had developed feelings for her boss and had already started an affair when I found out. It was an awful breakup and I was really hurt, but I also felt that I was an undeserving husband and was happy that she had met someone who would love her more than I could. During the separation, my life fell apart. I deferred university, quit my job at the genetics department, and was on a plane back to Thailand. A few weeks before departing, Oi had written to me and said that she had strong feelings for me and hoped that I would come back to her. She was now living in an apartment near a Lotus shopping mall. Oi hadn't changed. If anything, she was drinking more than before. She would not sleep until she had consumed at least 2 bottles of Sangthip, that horrible Thai whiskey infamous for its punishing hangovers. Every night she was paralytic. Oi had an endless stream of friends, mainly working girls, that stayed consistently at our apartment. We didn't get a moment's privacy. Moreover, she imposed upon me the financial burden of sustaining her alcohol consumption, a strain quickly depleting my resources. My money was running out very quickly. Compounding matters, Oi was facing pressure from the Mama-san, who was not happy about her relationship with the Farang. One day, she needed to go to Chiang Mai to take care of some personal business. At first, I said I didn't want to go as I didn't think much of Chiang Mai. I also felt that it would add more strain on my finances. Eventually, Oi talked me into it. Naturally, we brought one of her drinking friends along for the ride, and as I guessed, she stayed in the same room for the entire time. After Oi had settled her matters, she was ready to return to Bangkok. I had had enough of her. There was nothing romantic about our time together. She was either yapping with the constant visitors or drinking. I was just the convenient ATM machine. I told her that I liked Chiang Mai and I was going to stay a few more days. She said, "Do as you please," and with that, she was gone. I had been to Chiang Mai once before, but somehow had overlooked the incredible beauty of the city and the people. Maybe it was a contrast of the dingy and squalid little room that I was confined to for the last couple of weeks, which had led to this moment. I loved it, particularly in the historic quarter which is contained within the fortress walls. I was now alone in Chiang Mai and decided to explore the city. Near the old gate there was a big open bar centre with lots of open bars, and it was here that my next set of adventures started. I met many people during this time and got along with just about everyone. As I was walking through the bar centre one day, a man with long blonde hair pointed at me. I looked at him in confusion and wondered why he was pointing at me. He said, "Remember me?" I said, "No, I've never met you before in my life." He had confused me for somebody else, but we became inseparable after that. His name was Lars from Sweden. We had the wildest times, but even though we were popular with the girls, we never took any out of the bar. I was flirting with a young bar girl called Boone, and I preferred spending innocent time with her. The separation from my wife was still playing on my mind. I was not in the mood for much more than talking and drinking. Interestingly, Lars was also healing from a bad breakup. Another one of those fascinating coincidences. Boone eventually asked me to come to her town in Nakhon Sakon. Never one to pass up such an opportunity, I told Lars that I would go for a week and then I would meet him on a pre-arranged date at the Pink Panther Bar in Pat Pong. I travelled with Boone to Nakhon Sakon, but my relationship with Boone remained platonic. I may have only been 26, but thought that she was a little too young for me. She seemed very inexperienced, and a couple of the older bar girls were concerned about her welfare, particularly when they found out that she was travelling with me. But I wasn't like that. A simple friendship suited me just fine. I stayed in a hotel in the middle of town whilst Boone stayed at her aunt's house not too far from the town. Again, that meant that many nights were free to do as I pleased. One night, I almost got into trouble with two local girls that I met in a dancing club. I was alone. There were no foreigners in the club. A flirty girl approached me and we started talking. She was there with several other girls. One of the friends was a little wild girl who could move her like a belly dancer. She was a live cracker. Their sole plan was to rob me after I had fallen asleep. I could tell that something was not right. I wasn't feeling right and wanted to see what they were up to. So I suggested I go out to get some more alcohol. They agreed. However, I only pretended to go downstairs and had only planned to step out for a minute and then return with the excuse that I had forgotten to take my wallet. So I left the hotel room, but I waited a little bit down the hall. A minute later, one of them came out to see if the coast was clear. She saw me and ducked back inside. I walked back and kicked both of them out. It was Sakon Nakhon that I got my first insight into the treachery of bar girls. I was sitting at a dinner alone when an elderly gentleman who looked like he was in his 70s approached me. We fell into a conversation and he told me his sad story. He was presently with an older Thai woman who he said had been treating him very well. He said he was from Norway and that due to his arthritis likes to stay in Thailand. Previously, he had been with a younger bar girl. When he got back to his country, she rang him and said that she was pregnant with his child. He, being a fair man, said he would come back to look after the child and the mother. He sold his house in Norway and sent every penny to his girl. On the day of the birth, he came to the hospital. He said he took one look at the child and he knew instantly that this child was not his. He subsequently lost everything and was presently surviving off a small pension from his country. After saying goodbye to Boone, I paid homage to Nakhon Phanom, that hauntingly beautiful town that I'd fallen in love with on my first trip. It was as gorgeous as the first time I saw it. While there, I became good friends with the manager of the hotel in which I was staying. She took a liking to me and became quite clingy. Again, I wasn't interested. It was the time of Loy Krathong and we lit a krathong on the Mekong River. The candle went out shortly after the krathong drifted a few meters from the bank. She turned to me and said, "I don't think our relationship will last long." I just smiled and thought to myself, what relationship? One night she invited me to a funeral. The husband of a friend had died. I wasn't in the mood for somber events. I needed cheering up, not more depressing stuff. However, my curiosity got the better of me. That night was one of the most fascinating nights of my life. You may recall that on my first visit to Nakhon Phanom, I had briefly attended a very cheerful wedding. The mood of this funeral was the same. There was plenty of whiskey and lots of food and good company. While the deceased was lying inside the house, we sat outside on long tables, drank and laughed for hours on end. The children of the deceased looked a bit sad and I felt sorry for them, but I continued joking and laughing as though I was possessed by a jovial spirit. At around 2 a.m, many people started leaving. My friend said that we should go. I started feeling a bit guilty. I felt I had acted wrongly during this sad occasion. I said to my friend, I think I owe your friend an apology as I don't think I behaved properly with all my laughter and merriment. She smiled. The wife of the deceased man said, don't worry, this is normal in Thailand. She said that she had thoroughly enjoyed my company and thanked me for making it a merry occasion as her late husband would have enjoyed my company had he been alive. If I had acted that way in my culture, I would have been referred to a psychiatrist. I overstayed in Nakhon Phanom. The hotel manager insisted I stay longer, but it was not because of her I stayed on. Another staff member had caught my eye, and it was due to her that I delayed my trip to Bangkok. On the day I was meant to meet Lars at the Pink Panther in Patpong, I was still in Nakhon Phanom. These were still the days of no mobiles, no social media, and communication was very difficult. Such a missed opportunity would almost certainly mean losing all contact with Lars. I asked the hotel manager how I could contact the Pink Panther bar. No problem, she said. I have some friends who I can get the telephone number and we could ring at the time of the appointment. I realised at that moment that she was well connected with Patpong, but I said nothing. That night, we rang the Pink Panther bar and I asked them if they could see a man with long blonde hair. Sure, the girl answered, he's sitting right here. And so I was able to tell Lars that I was delayed and we reorganised a new date. Eventually, I returned to Oi's apartment in Bangkok, but our relationship was well and truly over. It was no more than a cool friendship. She had also realised I had run out of money, so her interest in me was greatly diminished. When I met Lars at the Pink Panther, I told him I would be leaving for Australia in a few days as I had run out of money. He seemed disappointed and said, look, I don't have a lot of money, but I have enough for us to get down to Hua Hin and have a great time together. I don't know why, but I agreed to go, and though I would spend some of the most impoverished times of my life, they were also some of the most memorable. From Bangkok, we rode down to Hua Hin on Lars' motorbike, taking turns to drive. At Hua Hin, we shared a single bedroom, a single bed. Every day we ate a breakfast consisting of 2 eggs and bread. This was the only meal we had each day. In the evenings, however, we would drink non-stop. The daily budget was 200 baht for food and accommodation and around 2,000 baht on alcohol. I met a girl called Ying at a bar and she became my girlfriend. We would sometimes slip away to the single bedroom while Lars was still drinking at the bar. She never asked me for money but expected me to treat her like my girlfriend. On one occasion, she had fallen asleep on the bed. Lars came home unexpectedly and got into bed. He noticed that she was in bed, cracked a smile, turned his back and went to sleep. Eventually it was time to go home. Lars rode into the sunset and Ying walked me to the Hua Hin railway station. I had around 200 baht in my pocket which Lars had given me and no scheduled flight back to home. Ying cried when I left. As bad as it may sound, I never saw her again, nor did I write to her. Back in Bangkok, I was in big trouble. I had absolutely no money and I was on standby for a flight back to Australia. I wasn't sure when I would be able to return and I had no way of knowing how to survive in the meantime. I went back to stay with Oi. She told me she had a new boyfriend and I couldn't stay with her. She still had some of my belongings at her house and told me to pick these up and leave. I scolded her, saying I'm the one that paid for her rent for a whole month. The least she could do is let me sleep on the floor. She eventually relented. I asked her if she could loan me some money, but she said that she didn't trust me that I would repay her. So she treated me with complete indifference. On one night, she had aerobics with her Thai boyfriend while I lay awake on the floor with another girl I had invited into the room. The girl was mortified and looked at me with astonished disbelief. I just smiled and shrugged my shoulders. I borrowed a little money from Pranny's brother and waited until I could get a flight out. I ate noodles for 2 weeks, so much for that incident when I was almost sick at the sight of pig's blood jelly in the noodle soup on my first trip. I could have eaten anything to survive. Eventually, I managed to book myself on a flight. I was down to my last 200 baht from the little I had borrowed, which was the exact amount required for the airport tax. I made it back by the skin of my teeth, and that was the end of my time in Thailand and my Thailand adventure. Do you know, it's always kind of baffled me how people come here. It was a great story, but it baffles me how people let themselves get so broke here. You know, I mean, I've always made sure I've had enough money as a backup plan if I need to stay a few more nights in a hotel or something like that when I used to visit from the UK. But we get these stories where guys literally run out of money, you know, and it's just, I just can't imagine myself in that kind of situation where I don't even have enough to eat for 2 weeks. But it happens, unfortunately. Right, okay, I'm going to jump straight into our third story because this is becoming quite a long upload this week. This is a real short story, and I've decided to just tag it on to the end just so the guy wrote it to me, so I thought, why not read it out? I reside in the USA and I'm now 62. I was divorced in 2016 and it took a year to get my head together and decide that I wanted to find a partner and have some fun in the process. I tried Asian Cupid and maybe some other dating sites. I soon learned that many females online were clearly gold diggers and possibly simply using the website to amuse themselves without seeking to pursue anything. I also learned of the huge number of overseas Filipino workers who generally work 3-year contracts or more. Taiwan, Japanese or Korea, developed countries. They are almost exclusively Filipino women. They work 5.5 days a week and live in dormitories, usually 6 to a room. What attracted me to this group was that they tend to speak better English since they interface with their host country bosses, live without family, and since they're cooped up in either a factory floor or dorm room, they are definitely ready, if you know what I mean, when their online friend, me, arrives. I doubt many guys are aware of this, but since I've been happily married for 5 years, I wanted to share this. I met a couple of Asian Cupid, but the key was to get their Facebook info because chances are many or most of their friends or co-workers likelihood that they are very clean. I would chat and video call, and if there were good vibes, find out their days off. 2-3 girls would have days off that would overlap, and I would plan a week in Taipei. Some work in other towns, but the high-speed rail makes it easy to reach them and just rent a nice room for that day. I made 2 trips in 2017-18 and met several really nice Filipinos who gave me the girl next door treatment. I never misled them. They were lonely and I was kind and respectful. Very good times. I also travelled to the Philippines, different story. I almost fell in love, but remembering the cliche that if you marry a Filipino, you also marry her family. I know true of all Asians, and I decided a different route. And that's it, basically. But I can relate to this story because when I worked in Singapore in the early 90s, I remember there were a lot of Filipino domestics who were living with families in Singapore. And if you went into town onto Orchard Road on a Sunday afternoon, you'd see literally hundreds of them gathered there because, you know, they were alone in these houses. They weren't in dormitories. They worked for independent families. So on their day off, they liked to go and mingle and gossip with their friends, which was fair enough. And it was quite an incredible sight to see. There are literally hundreds of them. But this is what happens. I don't know if it still goes on so much in Singapore as it did back then. Right, that's it once again, guys. Thanks for joining me. Great bunch of stories this week. Keep sending them in. If you're sitting on a story, don't forget, I'll change the names. I'll make it anonymous, and you too can hear your story read out right here on Thailand Bound. Thanks, guys. I'll catch you next week.